Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure it is to be here with you in person in Beirut, my first time in Lebanon. So thank you for the invitation, Dr. Moussaoui, and thank you for the very kind introduction, Dr. Awad. I will be talking to you today about the World Food Programme and how we're using data and analytics in our work for emergency response and building resilience. Normally, when we start these presentations, we ask the audience, are you aware of the World Food Programme and the work we do? And on the off chance that you don't, I'd like to share a video with you, which will just demonstrate our impact, exactly the work we do, and how we operate in the field. And if you give me a second to just cue this up. A very emotional experience to watch that and recognize the work that we do in the humanitarian space. So I thought that I would first sketch out for you the global context in which we operate, how WFP works, why we are quite unique in terms of our operations one, and also how we use data and analytics in our work, and then talk you through a few examples of the work that we do in the field and how we will be using and leveraging analytics, AI, etc., moving forward. And maybe also just to say, hearing from the speakers this morning so far, the drive to really be diverse in our approaches, both at a field level, but also at an organizational level, really strongly resonates with us. We've seen great work and great results from really using diverse teams in our emergency response and resilience work. So really the global crisis, and I don't like to start this on a negative note, but this is the reality of the world that we live in today. Of the 828 million chronically hungry people, with the resources that WFP received, we reached 150 million last year. We have 345 million at the risk of food insecurity, and WFP is a very large organization. We are the largest humanitarian agency in the world. We operate in 88 countries. We have 6 regional bureaus. Oh, sorry, there we go. I hope I'm more audible now. It's a perennial problem. So 88 countries in the world, and that's not just countries in which we operate. We reach about 120 countries across the world with our operations. We have 6 regional bureaus where our geographical operations are clustered around, and approximately 20,000 staff across the world. We have varied over the past 2 years of between 8 and 12 billion US dollars in terms of our operations, and this is both in food response as well as providing cash to beneficiaries. So we have a dual model of food and cash. Now, some of the things that are really relevant to our context as we think about how we use analytics and how we leverage data science, is that we are unique in the sense that we operate in very fragile contexts. Some of the data that the private sector would ordinarily have or collect is either not available, it's not a priority, or we don't have it. The stakes for a humanitarian agency are also very different. In the private sector, it's a loss of shareholder value. For us, if we're not able to reach a community where crisis has struck, people die. We provide life-saving emergency assistance and response. So as you can imagine, having the right data sets, being able to act very quickly and very rapidly within the first 24 to 48 hours, and also being able to reach the right people at the right time is absolutely crucial to make sure that we're effective as an organization. So WFP's supply chain as a division within the broader organization has a strategic roadmap which we released last year. And we're really looking at 3 pillars which are underpinned by 5 enablers. The 3 enablers that I just wanted to touch on today, just as a way of context, are technology and innovation, evidence-based decision-making, and investing in people. So technology and innovation is really how we're using new and disruptive technology. It's about using our decentralized operations and solving problems that are prevalent in the field. As you can imagine, with a very wide geographical network, we don't have all the answers at our HQ in Rome. Many of the answers, many of the ideas, and many of the problems are unique to the environments in which we operate. So we really do take a bottom-up approach to listening to the issues that our colleagues in the field are facing, helping them optimize their resources, and really providing the framework for which they can use those resources to reach people in need. Under evidence-based decision-making, we're really rethinking how we approach data and analytics. And one of the speakers has mentioned having a data strategy as an embedded part of your overall strategy. What we're looking at here is really turning on its head, as it were, the orientation around using the data you have to take decisions. What we're doing now is we are articulating the questions that we need answered in the field. And some of those questions are, how do you best optimize your resources? Where do you buy food from? How early do you buy food? Which locations do you pre-position food so we're able to respond to crisis at their early onset? It's also about using geospatial data to track crop cycles, etc. So these are some of the things that we're thinking about along the evidence-based decision-making lines. And then investing in people. It's really about being quite multidisciplinary, and in our data and innovation and analytics team, we have a number of skill sets. So it's not just data analysts and data scientists. We also have people who are specialized in law. We have people who are specialized in linguistics. We really want to look at many different ways in which you can approach a problem, and both from a geographical, gender, as well as a skills and competency approach, you really find that you are far more effective in how you're solving problems, and you're looking at things a little bit differently. So just in terms of our footprint in the field, so this is on any given day, how we're operating and why data and analytics is so important. We have 5,600 trucks on the road. We have a dedicated air freight, airdrop, and airlift capability, which also delivers food. So along the food delivery chain, we will utilize road transport as well as air transport, and much of our food is transported over sea. So we also make extensive use of discharge ports, load ports. We also operate some of our own fleet. Much of our fleet is owned. The majority of our trucks and logistics is outsourced, but we have 35 fleet workshops and then 650 warehouses where we store food for our operations, so we can release it when it is required in a particular operation. So this is to reach more than 100 million beneficiaries. Last year it was 150 million beneficiaries. The needs grow exponentially on an annual basis. So the need to optimize our resources as an entirely voluntary funded organization It's about how we use the money to purchase food, as well as the right combination of logistics and storage to get the food to where we need it to be so that it can reach our beneficiaries, as well as leverage cooperating partners in countries, either to directly assist beneficiaries to provide food as part of our school feeding programs, is why data is so important to us. Just a sense of the past 10 years, the trajectory in terms of our food procurement, it's showing an upward trend, but what we're also seeing is that with the inflation rising across the world, first COVID, and then the supply chain disruptions, it's becoming more and more expensive to maintain the level of assistance that WFP provides. So again, data, having the right data and analytics to help us decide when to buy food. So buying at the right time, at the right price, and storing and basically optimizing across those dimensions is critical to us to bring value for money to our resources. In the donor community, and because we're entirely donor funded, we're being stretched as an organization to show value for every single dollar that we receive from our donors. And I'll talk to that in a second around the work on food systems. So one of the myths that WFP has had to dispel as a humanitarian organization, and this is often the case when we speak to the private sector, is that we buy food internationally and we bring it into markets, and this really distorts local markets. It prices people who are not receiving assistance or beneficiaries from the physical markets, and it destroys very fragile food systems. So as part of our new strategy, we're really looking at how we can support the food systems by leveraging our $4 billion worth of food purchasing. And we're looking at the entire value chain. So when we procure food, we're also activating logistics networks along a number of corridors. So it's about how we can purchase to benefit local communities, make sure that we're not distorting markets or paying more than what is the current market value, because that also represents a distortion that we are trying not to create. And then also create more resilient livelihoods for farmers by purchasing indigenous crops. I'll talk in a second about how we constitute a food basket and how we are trying to introduce far more indigenous crops so we support the production and the sale of indigenous foods in the countries in which we operate. In the last year, in 2022, we purchased 60% of our food from low and lower middle income countries. 18% of the food has been bought from African countries, and that's primarily for our operations on the continent. And we're still lagging a little behind, but only 123,000 metric tons of food purchased from smallholder farmers. Well, I say only because we hope that it will soon reach at least 10% of all our purchases from smallholder farmers. So now to the interesting part and how we're leveraging data and our resource planning and optimization, which is really core and central. In supply chain, we start our process at planning. So we look at the money that we have available and how we optimize the food that we buy and store and deliver. So firstly, what's critical is what we buy and where we buy it. And we've developed a tool called Optimus, excuse the pun, but this is really to optimize all of our resourcing. We design a food basket in some of our operations where we provide in-kind food. This could constitute pulses or some type of cereal with some vegetable oil and other commodities. So Optimus really looks at optimizing the food basket based on resources available, local preferences, the modality selection, so it could be a cost-benefit analysis of food and cash. Ordinarily, we would go with cash where we find that there's an effective market and there isn't necessarily price gouging or any possibility that we will distort the market by injecting cash into the economy, and then sourcing and delivery strategies. We use Optimus in 44 of our operations, and we received the France Edelman Award in 2021, which was a recognition of how effective this tool is in humanitarian response. Prisma is another tool which gives full operational oversight of our operations. Now, we have what we refer to the pipeline, and something that's critical in terms of our environment is a pipeline break, which means that we don't have sufficient food in our pipeline to provide to beneficiaries who are expecting it or to cooperating partners. So Prisma gives a holistic picture of where we are in terms of resources that have been spent, food that is either in warehouse, in transit, ordered and expected to be delivered, and also has some predictive and prescriptive analytics, which is helping us plan for the remaining months of a fiscal cycle. Unfortunately, due to the confidential information in Prisma, I don't have a screenshot to share with you, but I will share a picture of what the Optimus landing page looks like. So this is just on the sourcing element of the tool, but as you'll see, there are many elements which we visualize for our users. The typical user of Optimus will be a planning person in the field, as well as country directors and regional country directors who want to get an overview of how the operation is currently funded and resourced. We are able to see where our food is coming from, the amount of lead time, which includes the procurement and shipping time, the different types of commodities that we have coming into country, as well as a distribution of where it is warehoused under the delivery tab. So this just gives you an idea of how we have sourced data points from many different systems across our WFP landscape to give a holistic picture of our operational planning and cycle. Then moving on to the decision making and measuring impact, which are, I'd say, new and developing areas within WFP supply chain, and really where we are placing our focus over the next 2 to 3 years. Firstly, the Farm Food Security Dashboard. I will show you a visual of this dashboard in a second. We were approached by the French government last year, and we were asked to collaborate on a mechanism to help countries that were adversely impacted from the various conflicts, supply chain disruptions, and were reliant on imports that were coming from countries that were in the Black Sea, or where transport was via the Black Sea. So we created a food security dashboard, which looked at a number of dimensions. We looked at current food insecurity or food insecure numbers, conflict, hazards, and natural disasters, and then debt distress and cereal dependence, which was based on balance of payments and a number of different data points. We created a composite index, and I'll show you the dashboard that was created just in terms of its impact. We are using it with donors because it generates a list of top 20 food insecure countries across the dimensions I mentioned. And we're able to help donors decide where they'd like to direct contributions. And also those contributions could be food or cereals that they may have in surplus. Demand and supply analysis, I think we are very good at our demand planning, but on the supply side, particularly where we're buying our food from, we're doing much more work in using analytics, but also being very blue sky in how we'd like to decide where to buy from, in what quantities and at what time. So we're working with local governments here, with the private sector, to really be far more robust about the supply decisions that we take to be more effective. And then on the measuring impact, as I mentioned, as a voluntary funded organization, we're required to show that we can stretch every dollar, that it's not just about providing food to beneficiaries in an emergency or crisis situation, but moving countries from emergency to emergent. So helping with the development aspects of crisis response, I mean, we really don't see it as mutually exclusive. We see several opportunities to also provide resilience and make governments and communities more resilient when we are in an emergency response situation. So we work with a number of partners, including the World Bank and other development agencies, looking at the impact of a dollar spent in a country. Is it attributable to traders? Are smallholder farmers receiving a fair wage or fair remuneration or a recovery of their costs at least when we're purchasing locally? And also looking at how we're developing local microeconomies along our logistics chains, as well as in local farming and smallholder communities. This is quite relevant to the work we're doing on local and regional food procurement. Our executive board approved a policy in 2019 which requires us to procure 10% of our food locally, 50% locally and 10% from smallholder farmers by 2025. So we really want to understand what are the incentives and disincentives, what are the opportunities, what are the costs and benefits to the smallholder farmers in order for us to scale those particular figures. This is just a visual of the Farm Composite Index. You'll see the top 25 countries on the right-hand side. If you toggle over a particular country, we have a number of data points which illustrate how we arrived at the prioritization and indexing of a particular country. So my final slide now on the future areas of work and just looking to where we want to drive supply chain within WFP. I think leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence across our value chain in everything we do. This is something that we're starting with the very first steps, but we hope to be far more advanced in this over the next 3 to 5 years. As I mentioned, availability of data is a big problem for us. We're working far more closely now with other agencies, the World Bank, etc., to collect the right types of data. As we say, if you don't have good data on which to use to drive your decisions are really not valid. So we're really working at piecing together a very holistic picture of what we need in order to leverage the tools that are available. Sustainability has been mentioned. We've recently drafted an environmental, social, and governance strategy, which we'll be implementing across our operations over the next year. Within the social dimension, we really want to focus on gender. We know that women constitute a large proportion of the agri-sector, but they're not well captured in the work that we do, along with just global figures across the private sector. So we really want to look at prioritizing women and the youth, employment opportunities, as well as within our own employment database to ensure that we reflect the diversity that we want to see as an organization. And then end-to-end traceability of our commodities. I know this sounds very simple, but it is an extremely complex problem for us in WFP. We collect beneficiary data, and this is the type of data that we really can't store or use in any particular system. Being able to trace our commodities and make sure that we've reached the right people with the food and really have a feedback and monitoring and evaluation loop has been difficult. This is a problem that we're hoping to crack in the next 2 years, also working with the private sector and looking at a number of different tools and systems. But our orientation here also is to really start at the business process, look at optimizing our process, removing redundant steps, and then moving forward with how we develop. So this is just a few ideas that we're working on and we're developing within the branch that I lead. And with that, I will close. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'm happy to take any questions and comments.
We have time for a few questions.
My name is David Mata. Thank you very much for the presentation. What I'm interested in is the multi-stakeholder view rather than the multidisciplinary view. When you are dealing with the farmers in particular, have you given them some technology tools to really leverage the technology to collect data or do something like that? And what are the challenges that you are facing with them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. So we have tried to work with farmers, and predominantly we work with farming organizations, which are just collaborative organizations through which we engage farmers directly. In terms of providing tools, we have tried to provide a number of different systems, but not the technology itself. Some of the challenges include incentivizing farmers to provide that information. Some of the information is not information that they're even collecting. Some smallholder farmers in particular prefer not to deal with large organizations like WFP. They prefer to sell within the local markets. There's a lot of our farmers that are in the informal sector and in the informal economy. There's also a very difficult relationship or balance between farmers and traders. Because in many of the contexts, just based on the nature of WFP's supplier database and the requirements to be a supplier, you need to have a particular volume of sales and of cash. So farmers are generally not very open about their cost of production or the profit that they're receiving because they're trying to manage the relationship with the trader. So these are some of the challenges that we have. We've seen some private sector companies actually provide the technology as well as the training to farmers. And we're looking at potentially providing that. So not actually developing it on our own, but leveraging our private sector partners that are working in some of these countries. Just in terms of the multi-stakeholder approach, we try not to operate on our own in some of these contexts because we are really on the food purchasing, emergency response, and resilience dimension. We work with our sister Rome-based agencies, the Food and Agricultural Organization, as well as IFAD, the World Bank. There are so many different agencies, humanitarian players, as well as the private sector that are engaging with farmers. So we're really trying to converge all of these approaches so we can share both best practices but also data and really try to have one consolidated entry point for our engagement with farmers.
Hello, I have a question. You mentioned about Insight and Prisma, in fact, sorry, Optimus and Prisma. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about food program, food stockage, and efficiency of the food baskets, in fact, mm-hmm. I want to understand what optimizations or numbers, let's say, that usage of data and artificial intelligence brought into the efficiency and the optimization of whether at the level of the food storage, food baskets, and eventually supply chain.
Yes, of course. So there are many dimensions. Firstly, it can start with the money that you have available, and we do quite a complex analysis around the cost benefits of purchasing locally, regionally, or internationally. And then you have basically a matrix which has the cost of logistics as well as the purchase price. So in many countries, the purchase price of a particular commodity may be cheaper to import. But then what we look at is the lead time of getting that commodity into the country, historical data about how long it takes from a customs perspective to clear through customs. We're looking at the expiration date and where we're purchasing it from. And then we're doing a cost benefit on storage in a strategic location. So across our regional bureaus, we have a number of strategic storage facilities where we would buy and store the stock and then be able to dispatch when it is required. So one of our country offices can also actually purchase from one of our strategic hubs. So there are various dimensions. We're using historical data and then current market pricing data, as well as data around storage capability, load port storage, dispatch port storage. It's quite complex, but basically what we're looking to do is optimize both lead time and the amount spent, as well as much as possible use a local commodity that is the preference in that particular country. So it can happen that we purchase some elements of a food basket locally, some of them internationally, but really it's to optimize price and availability.
Aman Barazi, I'm president of the National Council for Entrepreneurship. I want to ask if your data is available to be used by local NGOs so that we can do some work on it? Is it open data? And two, you mentioned something about your index, that you have a kind of, does the index have a kind of a spectrum where we can, for example, measure the food insecurity in the region? And if not, would you be able to work on this index? Would you allow us to do that? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So the first question, some of our data is publicly available, some is not, so it really depends on the type of data that we've collected. On the second question, yes, I think we can discuss this further. There are additional dimensions and elements to the dashboard that we are improving, so I think this will be publicly available and we'll be happy to share and discuss that with you.
Thank you. Really very interesting presentation and very interesting questions. I'm sorry, just for the sake of time, we want to thank our speaker. Thank you.